Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Another beautiful Ghazal by Maulana about fasting. And you know what Maulana does in his Ghazals? He takes us to the inner meaning of fasting. There's a lot of talk about the rules of fasting, what you can do, what you can't do, fiqh of fasting, and that's all good, that's all important. But Maulana takes us to, as he usually does, to the fiqh, the law of the law. Nahv, the grammar of the grammar. Usul ad-din, the roots of religion. So he wants to take us to the meaning of fasting. Why do we fast? What does that mean? And what is so lovable about fasting? Maulana says, حلاوت پنهان. There is this hidden sweetness. It's sweet, it's delicious, but it's hidden. People don't realize. You know, if you tell a lot of people, you know, it means you don't get to eat what you want, you don't get to drink what you want. People will say, oh, that's painful, that's undesirable. But it is actually desirable. It is actually sweet. It is actually delicious in its own way. And Maulana is going to explain in this Ghazal, what is that? What is that sweetness? Where does that sweetness come from? So yeah, inshallah, let's read this Ghazal and we'll talk about its meanings.
زهی حلاوت پنهان درین خلای شکم، مثال چنگ بود آدمی نه بیش و نه کم. چنانکه گر شکم چنگ پر شود مثلا، نه ناله آید از آن چنگ پر نه زیر و نه بم. اگر ز روزه بسوزد دماغ و اشکم تو، ز سوز ناله برآید ز سینه ات هر دم. هزار پرده بسوزی به هر دمی زان سوز، هزار پایه برآری به همت و به قدم. شکم تهی شو و می نال همچو نی به نیاز، شکم تهی شو و اسرار گو به سان قلم. چو پر شود شکمت در زمان حشر آرد، به جای عقل تو شیطان به جای کعبه صنم. چو روزه داری اخلاق خوب جمع شود، به پیش تو چو غلامان و چاکران و حشم. به روزه باش که آن خاتم سلیمان است، مده به دیو تو خاتم مزن تو ملک به هم. وگر ز کف تو شد ملک و لشکرت بگریخت، فراز آید لشکرت بر فراز علم. رسید مائده از آسمان به اهل صیام، به اهتمام دعاهای عیسی مریم. به روزه خوان کرم را تو منتظر می باش، از آنکه خوان کرم به ز شوربای کلم.
Bismillah. Oh, the hidden sweetness within this empty stomach. Humankind is like a lute, no more and no less, just as if the belly of the lute were to be stuffed full. No lament would rise from that full lute, neither high notes nor low. If your brain and belly are on fire through fasting, from that burning fire, a lament will rise from your chest at every moment. With every breath, you will burn away 1,000 veils through that fire. You will ascend 1,000 steps through spiritual resolve and endeavor. Empty your stomach and wail in supplication like the reed flute. Empty your stomach and reveal secrets just like the reed pen. When your stomach is full, it brings about a chaotic gathering. It replaces your intellect with Satan and the Kaaba with an idol. When you keep the fast, virtues will gather around you, standing before you like slaves, servants, and a loyal rent you. Keep the fast, for the fasting is signet ring of Solomon. Do not give your ring to the demon, nor throw your kingdom into ruin. And even if the kingdom slips from your grasp and your army flees, your forces will rally once more beneath your raised banner. A heavenly fast descends from the skies for the fasting ones, through the earnest prayers of Jesus, Son of Mary. Remain fasting and await the table of divine grace, because the table of divine grace is far better than cabbage soup.
So Maulana says, Zehi حلاوت پنهان, all the hidden sweetness within this empty stomach. And then the question arises, how is that sweet? What is sweet about an empty stomach? And then Maulana gives an analogy. He says, think about the sweet melody that comes from a harp. And not only a harp, any musical instrument. The beautiful song, the beautiful melody comes from a hollow inside, whether it's the nay of the Masnavi. Why does the nay have that beautiful sound? Because it's empty within, and then it can be filled with the breath of the flute player. And likewise it is with the harp. If it was just solid wood or solid whatever it is, no empty space, you wouldn't have that beautiful melody. Maulana uses the analogy of Rozan in the Masnavi, the window. What is it that makes the window luminous? What is it that makes the window so beautiful? It's because of that empty space that allows the light to come in. If it's just a wall, if it's just a solid wall, the light cannot come in. And that's what Maulana is saying fasting is about. Fasting is about creating that empty space. It's just like that window. It's just like harp or a lute or a flute or a cup. Maulana uses all sorts of analogies in the Masnavi, in the Divan. You know, what is it that makes a cup useful? It's that empty space again within the cup. When you become that empty space, you're receptive. You can receive the wine. You can receive the remembrance. When you're already filled, and a lot of the time we're filled with trash. We're literally filled with noise and trash and nothing, things that don't matter. When you're filled with all of that, then that the wine cannot be poured into you. So Maulana says the human being is like a lute. And think about this. If the belly of the lute were to be full, then nothing would arise. No lament would arise from that full lute. So again, when you eat a lot, imagine you've after a really large meal, you don't have that yearning and longing and that melody of that a fasting person does. And fasting is all about this. It's all about that empty space. And Maulana says, yes, I acknowledge fasting is not easy. Fasting is not easy on the ego. It is difficult, and especially in the beginning. Your brain and your belly, both of them are on fire through fasting. But then think about this. From that burning fire, there will be a lament, Nale. And that is the Nale that's sweet. That is the sweet lament. There will be a remembrance that's coming from your chest at every moment, which at other times you'll be distracted from. And yeah, Maulana says, because of that, with every breath, at every moment, you'll be able to burn away 1,000 veils. So there are these veils of ignorance, there are these veils of heedlessness that are between us and our true selves, between us and the light within us. And with that fire, you can burn all of these veils. With that fire. and then you will ascend. So for fasting for Maulana, it's not a passive act. A lot of people think fasting is passive. You just don't eat, you just don't drink. But no, it's an ascension. With your resolve, you will have a resolve when you're fasting that you don't have again when you're not fasting. And you'll be able to ascend 1,000 steps. And again, Maulana is talking about a deeper fast. It's not just about not eating, not drinking. That's the beginning. That's the foundation. Attar says, you think that fasting is just abstaining from eating and drinking? There are a lot of other things that are a condition for a true fast. And he's talking about the spiritual fast. So as Imam al-Ghazali, he says, yes, you have the fasting that's abstaining from eating and drinking. That's the beginning. But then you have a higher level of fasting, and that's abstaining from, gossiping, abstaining from lying, abstaining from listening to harmful things, abstaining from looking at harmful things. So that's a higher level of fasting. And then you have the fasting of khawas al-khawas, the elite of the elite, or the elect of the elect. And that fasting is ultimately fasting from everything else other than Allah. You say no to anything else. You abstain from anything else. You say la to anything else. And then you arrive at Allah. But the foundation, the beginning is nakhordan, is not eating, not drinking. And then that opens the gate to the higher level of fasting. And that in turn opens the gate, opens the way to the fasting of the elite of the elite. And this is why when Baha'uddin, Baha'u'llah, Maulana's son, asked him, people asked me, what is your way? What is your path? How can I explain it to them? And Maulana says, nakhordan. The first thing he says is, it's abstaining from eating and drinking. This was so fundamental to Maulana's path, above all other devotional acts. And that's why in the Ghazal, he says, A'zamul arkan siyam, the greatest pillar is fasting. But then he says, nay, no, rather it is to die. So when I'm talking about abstaining from eating and drinking, that's just the beginning. There's a higher level of fasting, and that is to die. That is the fasting. You die before you die. So saying no to all the other gods and all the other idols and all the other things that we worship instead of Allah, all the other distractions. That's the true fasting. And you will ascend 1,000 steps. Now Maulana says, when you become empty of belly, empty of stomach, then you can wail in supplication. You have that niyaz in you. And niyaz is the main thing, need. So, a lot of people call Allah, but without that niyaz, without that pain. Maulana says, خواندن بی درد از افسردگی است. If you call Allah without pain, without having that need, that is frozen. That is just like ice. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not flowing. That kind of supplication is not flowing. خواندن با درد از دلبردگی است. But when you call Allah with pain, with niyaz, that's from a heart that's in love. If you just pray out of habits, rituals, you do everything correctly, but there is no pain in there. That's frozen. You need to bring that pain. You need to bring that niyaz. And, there's so much in Maulana about this. Hazrat Shamsi says the essence of worship is niyaz. Because what else are you going to bring to Allah? Are you going to bring your knowledge? Allah is the most knowledgeable. Allah is Al-Alim, He's the knowing, all-knowing. Are you going to bring your power? Are you going to bring your achievements? No, none of that is going to be of any use. And Hazrat Shams says, Ubi niyaz ast. He doesn't have need. So take need. Take that poverty. Ubi niyaz ast, niyaz bebar. Anything else you take to Allah is like taking cumin to Kerman, as in the Persian proverb. Allah is the source of all of that. So take niyaz. And Maulana says this is what happens in fasting. When you're fasting, fasting represents that niyaz, that faqr, poverty, that emptiness, and you call Allah with that. And you reveal secrets, asrargu. When it's not only from you to Allah, it's also from Allah revealing to you. Allah revealing His secrets to you, that otherwise they're hidden when you're not fasting. Again, the analogy in the fihi ma fihi. The hungry person looks at the inner meaning of the bread, whereas the person who's had 4 meals or 5 meals just looks at the shape of the bread. So Maulana says, if you want secrets to be revealed to you, if you want to be like the reed pen, and the pen is of course sacred in Islamic tradition, Noon wal Qalam, Allah Ta'ala swears by the pen. If you want to be like that, you need to, again, empty your stomach. And then he talks about the opposite. What happens when your stomach is full? There will be a chaotic gathering. And it's like that gathering, it's also lust, right? It's all sorts of connotations in Persian. What happens? Your aql, your intellect is dethroned, and it's replaced with shaitan. It's Satan ruling instead of aql. And what is this shaitan? It's lust. It's lust and desires. And instead of Kaaba, you will have idols. You will have distractions. The pagans had 365 idols. The mushrikun had a few hundred idols. Ma be har dam dar boti nomitani. But for us, at every instant, there's a new idol. It's not just one idol for each day of the year. No, every instant we have a new idol. Every moment, something else becomes trendy and distracts us from Allah. Ma be har dam dar boti nomitani. Every moment we're distracted by Allah by something else. So fasting, it's also about finding that center. When a person has a center, you have one center, one beloved, you're not distracted by all the idols. And your Kaaba becomes cleansed. As Ibrahim and Ismail, they had to cleanse the Kaaba. And that's what we need to do each Ramadan, each day of fasting. We need to cleanse our Kaaba from these idols and these shaitans. When you keep the fast, again, the true fast, a fast that's with remembrance, all the virtues will gather around you. So the sign of a true fast is you'll be more charitable, you'll be more loving, more considerate, kinder, more truthful than when you're not fasting. All the virtues will gather around you, and you'll be happier. Maulana says it's haram. It's haram to fast with sorrow. It's haram to fast with grumpiness. He says, چون حرام است و نشاید همچو غمناکان سیام در سیام ار پانهی شادی کنان نه با گشاد. If you want to fast with joy. Fast with gushad, expansion of heart. Do not fast in a grumpy way, complaining all the time. So fasting should transform you in that way, being more grateful, being more thankful, being more humble. And it's just exactly like the Khatam of Sulaiman, the ring of Sulaiman. And there is that famous legend that Sulaiman loses his kingdom because a demon or a div he steals his ring, his signet ring, and he claims to be Sulaiman. So there's this false Sulaiman. And Sulaiman himself is hidden as a dervish somewhere until he finds his ring back. So, according to the legends, a fisherman helps him find it. There are different legends about it. But Maulana says, don't give your ring to the shaitan. Don't give your ring to the demon. Do not throw your kingdom to ruin. You need to keep your kingdom. You need to maintain your kingdom. And fasting is what helps you. Fasting is that ring that will help you gather your army, the army of faith, the nur, and that will gather. If you've lost your kingdom, don't worry. Your forces will come back. They will rally once more, once you raise your banner. And that banner, again, is fasting. اگر ز کف تو شد ملک و لشکرت بگریخت فراز آید لشکرت بر فراز علم. And once you raise this banner of fasting, all the virtues will come back to you. And fasting is what helps your praise to ascend. Just like the Ma'idah, like in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Sayyidina Isa, he prays to Allah, send a Ma'idah, a table from heaven. And this will be a celebration for us. Now, it came to people who were fasting. So fasting, again, makes your prayers rise to the heavens. And there is that element of fasting in Jesus. He fasted for 40 days in the desert. As the Gospels also say, he says, man does not live by bread alone. There's another type of bread. There's another type of food. And that's the Ma'idah. Maulana says, the whole point of fasting is you make room for this food, for the spiritual food. All day, other times, you've tried all sorts of different foods. You've tried halwa, you've tried pakora, you've tried pajin, you've tried kebab, shami, all sorts of things. But try this as well. Try this, try this other type of food. There is another type of food. As Ainul Ghazal Hamadani, he says, people think fasting, it's all about not eating and not drinking. No, it's actually about eating. It's actually about drinking. Well, eating from the food of habit, eating from the food of, I stay with my Lord, as the Prophet ﷺ says, I stay every night, I stay with my Lord, and he gives me food, and he gives me drink. What is that food? It's not kebab. It's the spiritual nourishment. قوت جبرئیل از مطبخ نبود. The power of Jibreel does not come from the kitchen. The power of Jibreel comes from gazing at the beloved. بلکه از دیدار خلاق ودود. So Jibreel, who is all that powerful, that power does not come from eating pizza. It comes from gazing at the beloved. And this is all the fasting, this is what fasting is about. Taking us from grazing to gazing. Taking us from the food that, as Maulana says, in luqme ke mikhori qazar mikarda. You eat it and it becomes foul. But then there's another type of food that when you eat it, it becomes light. It becomes basar. It becomes vision. It becomes insight. And fasting is all about that. So, last bait, Maulana says, wait for this. Wait for this. Khane karam. Beruze khane karam ra to muntazir mibash. There is this table of bounty, table of grace, and it's far better. It's far better than cabbage soup. And cabbage soup is ultimately all the delicious things in this dunya, all the pleasant things in this dunya. It's ultimately just like cabbage soup. But there are things that are far better. There are things that are far better. And fasting, it's all about making room. So you're hungry enough to partake in that banquet, in that table.
While you were discussing this beautiful concept that there are different levels to fasting, I was reminded of this verse in the Quran, in the Surah Maryam, where the angels instruct Maryam to tell people that إني نذرت للرحمن صوما فلن أكلم اليوم إنسيا. So on the one hand, it's just could be interpreted as uh, silence fasting, which was, I think, common at that time in Judea. But it's also, I think, it could also be attributed to that other type of fasting that in while I'm fasting, I lose connection to all other humans. So that's how fasting is described in that verse. So I'm not talking to to any humans, which means that she's only be talking to Allah and to the angels. So I think it's a very nice idea to see that fasting um, is maybe a prerequisite for a deeper connection, a higher connection with the spiritual world. By just letting go of our earthly needs for limited amount of time, and that also was a very nice a very nice way to look at things for me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the message that I'm getting from Surah Maryam in general. Withdrawing, you have first the story of Zakaria, and he goes into a secluded place, and then he calls Allah in secret, Nida'an Khafiya. And then you have the story of Sayyidatna Maryam. So she puts a veil between her and the people who are worldly people. She puts a veil between herself and those people. And then that's when the veils are removed, lifted, the veils between her and the Lord and the world of meaning. And then the spirit, and the spirit comes to her. So yes, in Ramadan, I mean, it's abstaining from food and drink, but it's also that element of going to the interior. For the other months, we're all sorts of going out, people, and we do need that. But in this month, there's also that element of withdrawing, withdrawing in the sense of the inner, right, the heart. So maintaining that connection with Allah, and saying no to a lot of those things, a lot of those meetings, those which do not help us ultimately.
Just it's such a beautiful, so many things regarding that connection between emptiness and the fire that you mentioned. Both these ideas come. So I was just reminded of this in that Nay Nama, the beginning of the Masnavi, Atashe Ishkast andar Nay Futat or something. So that is this idea of fire in the Nay. That fire and that idea that also comes to, it reminds of the word, I think Ramadan means, I think scorching heat or some, there's a meaning in that original term, actually means that heat. And this fire and that emptiness and burning, with every breath you will burn 1,000 veils, it's mentioned. So this fire and the fire of love, and it is that the fire and the light, and light is also mentioned somewhere. So this idea that fire can also be a light, and that heat and light, those two dimensions of the fire, that's the heat transformed into light, is where I think the alchemic or rather the transformative aspect of that heat is required, but that it is for the light, and the heat becoming light, and all those ideas are, I think, there. One more thing is that 1,000, with every breath you will burn 1,000 veils. I think I was reminded that 1,000 means 1,000. So it's like that zero. It's being and zero, and then there is one. So I was just reminded that there's one means like divine one, and then zero means we are like a zero. Like, I mean, and then how many zeros your power increases? Like 10 raised to 5 or 10 raised to 3, like that. Like the zero, the intensity of zero, like we mentioned about the degrees of fasting. I was just thinking that so many zeros, I mean, 10 raised to 3 or 10 raised to 4 means it becomes, the value increases. So the number of how much can you become like zero or zeroed or become like empty, or all those ideas come into it, and then one is there as that, and all those things I think came to mind.
Zahra.
Yeah, it reminded me of Surah Kahf as well, where they go into the cave where they're secluded, and then there's no food. So, God is just completely sustaining them. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's just so much, being in this kind of quiet place away from all the distractions. And
absolutely. Indeed. And that cave is ultimately, again, the remembrance of Allah. That's the cave we need to seek refuge in, from all the distractions and all the.
It seems like there's something related to being in the dark, like when we wake up in the dark, it's like quiet, and there's something mysterious about darkness.
Absolutely. Indeed. And like as Ashfaq was talking about Hazar, the 1,000, we also have the Laylatul Qadr khayrun min alf shahr. It's better than 1,000 months. So, in one night you can do what's, 1,000. That's because of, again, that grace that comes from. So. Oh, yes, Ashfaq.
It was mentioned regarding the mystery or the mysteriousness of darkness. And I was thinking that like all this darkness, silence, and also fasting or hunger, all of them are in a sense that mystery, or rather that negative aspect of that is there in that. And then love too, because in Maulana, I think in Masnavi it is mentioned, Pas chebashad ishq dariyai adam. It's mentioned there. That is that ocean of non-existence or whatever. I don't know whether that's that non-being or whatever, and that or that connection between that emptiness, non-being, silence, and fasting, and all of them are, I think, very organically connected to each other in more than like a kind of artificial link. It's just having that natural connection, which I think becomes operative in the properly in the blessed. If you are having that blessing to experience that, maybe all of them come together.
Definitely, Allah. Yeah, the symbolism of darkness is absolutely important too, and that again represents the fana, not being, and saying no, the law of la ilaha illallah. In the legends, again, Shahnameh and other places, there's the legend of Alexander and Khizr. So they're both looking for the water of life, the water of eternal life. And Alexander goes to the path of light. He wants to find it in bright places, and he doesn't find the water of life, and he's destroyed. Whereas Khizr finds the water of life in darkness. So again, it's found in this path of saying no, the path of law of la ilaha illallah. That's the not being. Yeah.
And this towards the end, this idea of ma'ida, and then this, I was thinking of this thing called, generally they use this fasting and feasting. They mention this together sometimes, like negatively and positively. Sometimes, we have our communities, Muslim communities, have sometimes a tendency to overeat at night, and the spread, the ma'ida is too tempting at the time of the breaking of the fast is also there, and that fasting and feasting and together. And also this term which I heard from the Lubbe Lubabe Masnavi, he quotes this thing, that al-ju'u ta'amul anbiya'i, like that is that kind of, it's the fasting is the food of the prophets, and they take abitu, God gives me to eat, and the Prophet ﷺ says that what is that kind of, it's not that physical food, obviously it's spiritual thing.
Definitely. Allah, indeed. So yeah, may Allah Ta'ala, inshallah, enable us to be from the people who truly fast, you know. And that's more than just abstaining from eating and drinking. That's also abstaining from all evil thoughts, whether it's in our thoughts or actions or words, and to empty us ultimately of everything else and bring us closer to his remembrance and being with him. Yeah, it's also about feasting. Ramadan, it's not just about fasting, it's about feasting. So it's all about partaking in that table, Khane Karam, as Maulana calls, the table of divine grace. May we all, inshallah, be part of this banquet.